Hello and welcome back to Fuel for Thought, our weekly look at all things energy related and beyond. Scott Squires, pleased as always to be joined by the insider, Dan McTagg. And Dan, I know your time is limited today with all that's going on. You've got a lot of demands on your time, so we'll get right to it. First things first, here as we record on a Friday, what are you seeing in the Atlantic region that's happened with prices when consumers go to fill up, and kind of what do you see happening nationally, right now and maybe a week or two in advance?
Good to be here, Scott. And yes, always making time for this is critical. We get this point out. Atlantic Canada saw, many regions saw a pretty big drop, a steep drop. Nova Scotia, 6 cents a liter down for gasoline, down 3, 4 cents a liter for diesel. Other places, New Brunswick, PEI, and even Newfoundland saw a smaller decrease, but nevertheless a welcome one. All reflecting, I think, the negative mood in on markets today with the talk of tariffs and maybe detente when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, and of course the idea that the world seems to be well supplied. Of course, this is a bit of a moving target. It can go up and down at any given time, but we are getting past the shoulder season where refiners are going to start to think about summer blends of gasoline. So, what can go down for the next couple of weeks may actually start to go up a little bit as we head towards April 1st, when we have an increase in the carbon taxes. Everybody loves that, of course, not. And we have, of course, 2 weeks following that, the rise of at least another 5, 6 cents a liter with respect to the switch over from winter to summer gasoline. That's happening right across North America, where prices have been relatively quiet, although we did notice last week the Bank of Canada said, hey, inflation's up, because in the month of January compared to the month of January the previous year, inflation had reflected the fact that gasoline prices had gone up. And you know what, Scott? Gasoline prices do matter. Anybody who thinks it's not the case only has to look at their food bill, housing bill, heating bill. When price of gas goes up, so does the price of everything else. When it goes down, we also see an equal positive measure in terms of less strain and stress on inflation.
And before we move on from prices that we're seeing for gas, diesel, etc., a pretty big drop here in Nova Scotia today, about 6 cents a liter. I know you and I have talked many times in the past, Dan, about the regulations here in Atlantic Canada, the Nova Scotia Utility and Review Board setting prices, and how you've often said that sometimes the math doesn't add up. Were you expecting such a large drop in Nova Scotia? And if not, why not?
3 cents is the number, but that's compared to the rest of the markets in North America. It means that somewhere along the way, the Nova Scotia utilities, NSUARB, decided that it would be a good idea to pad in an extra 3 cents a liter that just wasn't there, because markets didn't reflect that. The wholesale price for gasoline in the past 5, 7 days has indicated a 3 cent net decrease. The fact that 6 is something to cheer about, as I mentioned earlier, but it does concern me that an extra 3 cents has been levied onto consumers because bureaucrats have found an interesting way to come up with a calculation that justified it. Look, we need to get back to reality. Like everything else, let's let transparency and let's let the markets make those decisions, not a bunch of bureaucrats sitting around trying to second guess what's happening in the markets, and let people know every second day they can save prices at the pumps by simply going to various sites, including mine, which I pioneered back 30 years ago, which allows people a 2-day heads up in terms of where prices are going, rather than waiting for governments to decide what the price ought to be.
And Dan, we'll move on now and talk about some of the political stories that are catching people's attention here the last couple of days. And certainly a lot has come out since the Liberal leadership debates, the French language debate one night and then the English the next. And I know there's a lot to wade into here, and I'll try to summarize it as best I can. The company that Mr. Mark Carney was chairman of the board for, Brookfield, they moved their offices headquartered from Canada to New York to the United States. In the debate, Mr. Carney claimed that he was not a member of the board. He had stepped down in mid-January to run for the Liberal leadership, and thus was not part of the decision to move the offices for Brookfield from Canada to the United States. That has basically exploded on social media, with so many taking the task, saying that that's an outright lie. The memes on social media, in particular X, yesterday were just off the charts with the hashtag Carney lies. I mean, so many AI generated memes calling him out for it. Basically, putting him in all these situations, saying, it wasn't this person that did this historical event. It was Mark Carney, and he claims he did this, and all these different memes. All that aside, you have to give everyone the benefit of the doubt, Dan. But again, you were a Liberal MP for 18 years. You're very well connected in the circles of the political halls. What do you make of all this, Dan? And break it down. Like, what happened?
Well, what's happened is that he finally got caught, and Canadians aren't going to be putting up with the nonsense that they did 10 years ago because it's 2015. It's 2025. People aren't going to, buy something on a pig and a poke anymore. It works out that, and you and I discussed this in our previous sessions about Mr. Carney, the concerns I had about his making claims that I don't think were justified. The 2008 economic meltdown, he claimed that he had a lot to do with mitigating the effect. No, it was actually David Dodge and Paul Martin, and you and I talked about that. This is a guy who goes around shamelessly saying that he's done great things while at the same time blocking pipelines in Canada, but getting Brookfield and others to invest heavily in pipelines in Brazil and pipelines, of course, in Arab Emirates. This is a fellow who said he's concerned about the way Trudeau's economy and Trudeau has performed. Yet was really the economic czar for Justin Trudeau over the past 5 years. So I don't think it's fair to dismiss the idea that Canadians are becoming growingly and very quickly skeptical of a guy who is clearly something he is not. He's being presented, obviously, with his friends, his European friends, and his Eurasia group, and all these other groups that are behind him. He's seen as Justin Trudeau 2.0, and I wrote about this at affordableenergy.ca. Why Mark Carney will be bad for Canada's economy, and I am more further convinced the fact that once again, those years of experience in both the private and public sector have led me to believe that when you make statements, you better damn well back them up. But we did predict this guy's demise would eventually be exposed, and I think it's very clear that despite the nice, quiet, polite, so-called leadership where two candidates are punted out, the rest of them are fair to say, inside grifters looking to maintain their positions within the party. Mr. Carney's been given an easy ride. He won't get that the moment he becomes prime minister, the moment he gets elected by 7,000 people rather than 41 million people across this country.
And far be it for me to think that I can get inside someone's head and know what they're thinking. However, I will ask you this again, because of your experience in the halls of Parliament and being so closely associated with politics, again, 18-year MP and beyond, privy councils, etc. I'm sure you've witnessed many political gaffes over your career where somebody said something and then was like, oh my gosh, I misspoke. Oops, sorry. Mr. Carney seems like a really intelligent man. He seems that, he has the ability to think about things and know what he's saying. Given all of that, and again, I don't know the man personally, but he certainly seems like he's intelligent. Hard not to be, given the things he's done. However, having said that, for him to make the statement that he made, do you feel that he's just trying to distance himself? Do you feel that he really thinks that he wasn't part of moving Brookfield? Or do you think that this was just a political play to try and get some Canadians to scratch their head and go, well, maybe he wasn't
Well,
part of it? Again, you can't get inside of his head. You don't know what he's thinking, but what do you make of it?
well, I make of it that they seem to be all, mesmerized by the fact that he has these credentials which I don't take away from him, but everywhere he's gone, he's had the Midas touch in reverse. That is, he's turned things awfully upside down, and not in a way and not in a very good way. I think Mr. Carney is now realizing that the electorate is very different. He doesn't have a lot of experience in politics. Now, he claims that Pierre Poilievre and others have too much and are only in politics and have no outside experience. If the outside experience he's referring to is the kind that have hurt Canada with blocking pipelines, preventing billions of dollars in economic activity, blocking LNG projects, which the United States is inked a deal with Japan as exempted for $1 trillion. Imagine how many hospital beds and pensions that could pay in this country. I digress. I think for Mr. Carney, he's going to learn the valuable lesson that I learned when I was an MP in 1993. My leadership candidate, Jean Chrétien, he had no experience in the private sector, but he was a damn good politician and a seasoned one at that. And he knew how to hire the right people to get the country. So anybody out there, any trendy liberals who think, oh, Mr. Carney has tons of experience and Polyev doesn't have any experience. It's all political. And, that's really a sort of one trick pony. Let me tell you something. Jacques Chrétien was accused of the same thing and he turned this country around. So, like it or not, it's a real problem for liberals because in the past they've gone to people like Jacques Chrétien to get them out of difficulty. Now they have somebody from the outside who's demonstrated their inability not just to be dishonest about their own background, but has really created catastrophe where he's gone. By the way, I don't even get into the whole point about antitrust and cartels and what he's tried to do to stifle investments in the natural gas, oil, and emissions and into the energy sector, which has hurt and crippled Canada. This is a man who I think has a lot of explaining to do and hasn't been able to do that. Believe me, the media can't protect what's going to happen when Pierre Poilievre and the 40 some odd million dollars the Conservatives have raised are going to be used to put a flame under this guy. And I think that's going to demonstrate what I've been able to say from the surface. This is really an empty suit. It's nice to talk about what you are. Everyone has good credentials out there, but if you think a guy who's had a lot to do with diminishing Canada's economic outlook is somehow its savior, well, you're crazy. As I said before, maybe this is as bad as Justin Trudeau 2.0.
And Dan, I'll ask you to put your prognostication hat on here for a second. In the world of sports, sports commentators and prognosticators love to talk about a matchup. This team will beat this team because of this, or this person will defeat this person because of this. Who knows what will happen? Who knows if they'll even debate? There's some saying that Mr. Carney won't even want to debate Mr. Poilievre, but let's just say you're predicting the outcome. Poilievre, Carney, debate stage. What do you see as the outcome?
Well, I don't think Mr. Carney will survive, a direct attack from Pierre Poilievre. He's extremely gifted, knows his stuff. He's a damn good debater. He was in my time too, and I did debate him. I don't say I lost, but I don't think I won. But I think there's a good chance that as Canadians settle down and realize it's the old ways and doubling down on net zero and policies that have hurt Canada and increasing our debt, which will make us economically unviable. The fact he wants to invoke emergency measures, that fact that he's already indicated that he's willing to hide the carbon tax and force companies to pay for it will only cause more people to lose their jobs and pass that on to consumers ultimately. I don't think he's got a hope in hell. And, I think liberals know that. Liberals I speak to, who I've known for many years, are saying it's over for the Liberal Party. They know it. This is just going through the motions. Yes, there's a blip. It's not Trudeau, so everyone's relieved. But when it turns out that it is Justin Trudeau on steroids, and it's worse than Justin Trudeau, if one can say that, except he's probably a little smoother. It's likely that I think Canadians are going to make a decision as to what they wanted for the past 2 years. That's change the Liberal Party, along with the NDP, have denied Canadians the opportunity to go to an election, especially in a minority government. You have the flimsiest of governments that hasn't really held an account of itself, at least since September, now wanting to cling to another hope. Look, it's time for an election. Let Canadians decide. The very fact that they've tried everything to maneuver to get away from that demonstrates to me that it's all over for Mark Carney, but the vote counting.
We've just got a couple minutes left here, Dan. But speaking of Canadians and elections, in your province of Ontario, yesterday, Ontarians went to the polls and re-elected a third consecutive majority government for Doug Ford. Unprecedented. 3 consecutive majorities at the provincial level in Ontario has never happened. Now, I know that there can be a lot of separation between provincial politics and federal politics, but do you see any trending or any bellwether effects from this Ontario result in terms of how it may show that how Canadians are feeling overall about Liberals, NDP, Conservatives, etc.?
Oh, I think Doug Ford picked their election at the right time. The fact he forced an election, which he didn't before the madness hits, and we see the effect of Trump's tariffs, before we see the madness of having invested as much money as they did in EVs that are going to collapse and have a real damaging impact on the automotive sector. Mr. Ford used his political instinct to his advantage and was able to define his opposition as irrelevant because he'd won on their side too. Even labor unions were supporting Doug Ford, not public service unions, because of course they want more money, and that's not to take away from them. Everyone does, but the reality is that for Mr. Ford, he was able to pretty much capture all of the issues, minimize the negatives about him, and at the end of the day, people were not prepared to go with socialism, either espoused by liberals or by the NDP, or more government spending in order to solve a problem that can be better solved by better and more fiscal discipline in terms of things like healthcare, in terms of transportation and whatnot. So, look, conflict of interest for me is that I've known Doug since I was a baby. baby. They lived next door to our cottage, Diane and Doug Ford, good friends of my parents, although we were politically different. They were conservatives, we were liberals. And on the federal leadership, I can't say a whole lot more about Mark Carney because my lifelong friend, who I've known since I was 5 years of age, was Frank Bayless. We went to school together, and I taught him his ropes in terms of politics. So for me, all of this, Scott, is politics is a lot closer than just something I speak of in the abstract. It's something that's very up close and personal for a variety of reasons, well beyond politics.
Well, Dan, that's why I enjoy speaking with you each and every week. Yes, it's great to be able to talk about these things and get them out into the ether and let people listen and make their own decisions based on what they're hearing. But for me, I learn each and every week from you. And over the couple of years that we've been doing this, I've learned so much more about the internal workings of politics. And maybe I'm biased, but I will say that so much of what you talk about, predict, lay out that you think is going to happen, the majority of the time, it kind of unfolds as you've seen it. And again, that just comes to your experience being around politics and politicians and people of that ilk for decades and decades. And again, can't say enough how much I appreciate you being here. And I would welcome anyone that ever wanted to come on and have an opposing view and debate you. I know that you would welcome it. I just wanted to get that out there before we wrapped up
Thank you.
today. And when you're not here hanging out with me and sharing all your knowledge and helping me learn, and hopefully our listeners and viewers as well, where can people find you, Dan?
Best ways, there are two of them. Gas Price Wizard on X. I do a lot of work. There's 60,000 plus people following me there, and I do interchange with them respectfully. But if you're not, then that's a different matter. And of course, affordableenergy.ca, where I put up articles virtually every week on the latest trends. I have a new one coming out today, which will be discussing not just carbon taxes and Mark Carney, but also, of course, the road ahead for Canada. So have a look at those. A lot of my thoughts I tend to put down on paper and provide people my perspective. It may not necessarily accord with most people, but at the end of the day, that's it's my 2 cents worth.
Well, the great thing with you, Dan, is that you may not agree with others, others may not agree with you, but you're always willing to engage and talk about it, as
Exactly.
you say, respectfully. We appreciate your time as always. Enjoy the rest of your day. Have a fantastic weekend. We got a bit of a thaw here the last
Yep.
couple of days in Nova Scotia. I can actually see my driveway now, not a hockey rink. But all the best to you and the best to your family.
We'll see you next week. Thanks for having me, Scott. Cheers.
Thank you, Dan.